Hello and welcome to Right Now at the Comedy Club, here at the Comedy Club of Kansas City. I am your host, Dustin Kaufman. Follow us online. We keep it really simple, just at the Comedy Club KC across the board, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know if TikTok's still a thing, but I think you can find us there. And definitely find us right now at the Comedy Club on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. All right, we're going to get to it. With me, with us, with you and I right now, the always wonderful Mr. Myq Kaplan. Welcome to the podcast and welcome back to the Comedy Club.
Thrilled for both. Thank you so much.
It's you've been with us a lot, actually.
Yeah, since 2021, right? This was the first place I performed when things reopened after the pandemic, after vaccinations, and my girlfriend's mother had just moved to this area. I think just a couple years before that. So we drove out here, and now we try to come out and visit the family whenever possible, a few times a year. And I'm happy for those to coincide with opportunities to headline the club or pop in and do whatever whenever.
Or pop in, which is really cool. I mean, usually you definitely are usually headlining when you're here. If it works out, what I love is that you're like, hey, man, just put me on stage. Like I remember even Felipe Esparza, you were doing guest spots the entire weekend, and I don't think the club had anything to do with that. They're like, hey, Myq Kaplan's doing guest spots all weekend. I'm like, that's amazing. Like,
it was fun. Felipe is so great. We met up on Last Comic Standing in 2010, and he's a great dude.
I ran into him at the airport back in August.
Oh yeah, he's who books that? Yeah. Good night, everybody. That's been Right Now on my podcast. I've taken it over.
What's really cool about that, though, having I remember when you're doing guest spots for Felipe, and just I started in comedy in Kansas City, 99, 2000, right? I've seen and it's usually the very traditional MC feature headliner, occasional local guest spot, right? It's newer for Kansas City and becoming more common, but it's newer and really special when things like that happen, because Kansas City hasn't had the opportunity to be blessed with those pop-ins as much, or those just having like that total caliber of show top to bottom, where there's multiple headliners on the show across, and to be able to not only witness it and be a part of it, but to help be able to provide that to this, it really means a lot, and it's really cool having you around this as often as you are.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, I guess it's sort of like, the way that Chappelle has his, farm in the middle of Ohio. I'm basically the Chappelle of Kansas City, and so that's what I'm known as. If it gets started, I'm trying to start it here. The non-transphobic Chappelle of Kansas City. But yeah, no, I mean, I love doing comedy, and I feel like there's a thing, when I started out, also, the very first time I performed at a comedy club was 1999. I was not pursuing comedy at the time. I was pursuing music. But over the next couple of years, I was performing at music open mics, and I would pop into this comedy club whenever they'd let me do my funny songs. But 2002 is when I really started pursuing comedy, and there was same as I was in Boston, and it's similar to here. It was mostly a very structured, when you got 15 minutes, you can be an opener. When you got a half an hour, you can be the middle act. When you've got an hour, you have to leave town because all the headliners are very territorial about their spots. There's headliners in New England that are there since the 80s, and they're not leaving until you got to wait for them to die. It's very rare to come up in the New England scene and become a New England but there's a little ecosystem there with the biggest headliners like Tony V and DJ Hazard were these guys when I started, and Tim McIntyre, Don Gavin and Steve Sweeney, and then also occasionally a woman, and Patty Ross and Wendy Liebman, and there's just Sue Connolly. There's I'll keep naming people. That's the whole podcast.
Just comics from New England.
Yeah. Here's the New England ones, but even your Joe List is a guy I started out around the same time as.
Sarah, could you get us last week's open mic list at all the New England comedy clubs?
But the point is, you start out and you're like, okay, well, I want to work my way up through these ranks because you want to think that it's and it is to some degree a meritocracy. You could even like there's some people who believe that, oh, like, hey, I was here first, you know. I feel like when
that doesn't matter.
Yeah, when Stephen Wright, you know, there's a movie, I don't know if you ever watched the documentary When Stand Up Stood Out, which was about like the scene in the Boston comedy situation in the 80s. And so there's a part where like Stephen Wright was discovered essentially by the Johnny Carson Tonight Show booker in like the early 80s, just because he was coming to town to show his kid like colleges. They were looking at colleges, and he was like, I'll go see a showcase. And so they had all these big hitters, like, you know, your Dennis Leary's and your Lenny Clark's, you know, like all these people who are like, you know, powerhouses who would become, you know, celebrities. But at the time they were just, you know, like local headliners. And Stephen Wright, I think, was just featuring at the time. He was just, you know, a quiet dude who was not a full-time, you know, touring comedian. But of all the people on the show, he was the one who, I heard he was the only one who like didn't like mob the guy in the parking lot after the show, and he was the only guy who was on Carson like the next week, and then again maybe a few weeks later, and then that like made his career. But even I feel like when he got it,
And
when they
look
were
how
like,
long
yeah.
that carries too.
Oh, to this day, I mean,
Carson, he's still to this day, he's working theaters.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and he's a genius. He's
Absolutely.
wonderful. And at the time, he was like, but shouldn't Lenny Clark be like ahead of me? You know, like I just got here. You know, I hardly even.
So it's a really dangerous for a comedian to think that way.
Yes,
I've always been in the mindset that you should never be in a race with somebody else's career.
Oh, absolutely.
It is one of the most detrimental things. And if there's any comedians listening, please, seriously.
If there's anyone listening, yeah. Is anyone listening? Hello? We're listening. No, 100%.
Hello?
Hello? Is this for the listener on iTunes? Dustin is doing a very funny bit of physical comedy, putting his ear to the microphone. That's if you hear the difference in sound. It was great.
Is there anybody there? Hello? I can't hear you.
Is this thing on? I'm tapping my ear. Hello. I can't hear myself. Think.
Hello?
Yeah, no,
hello?
Sincerely, I'm sorry to hijack your very good point, which is absolutely, we are not, like, there is no competition. It seems that way. It seems there's a limited number of spots.
I've seen what it can do to people.
Oh, yeah.
That type of emotion can really instill this, like, bitterness, this jadedness that just everybody does it at their own pace. Everybody's on a different path. And that's what's so unique about this industry is bands come up together. Comics can come out of the crop together, but man, everybody's taking their own path to get there. And so you just have to keep focusing on yourself. What are you doing? Are you doing the best that you can? And that's all that you should be worried about.
Absolutely. And so I feel like in the beginning, you know, I wanted to become a headliner. I wanted to be like, you know, touring and eventually have, you know, a following, people who would I just wanted a career. I just wanted to do stand-up. I wanted to be able to do stand-up however I could. And to the point now where a few months ago, I opened for Emo Phillips for the first time in like 2008
Emo
or so.
Is so awesome.
He's the best. He
One
is
of the most unique people I've ever met.
Oh yeah, one of the funniest. Yeah, you could read his jokes off a piece of paper and die laughing. Like he is an incredible performer. Everything. He's wonderful. So I've been fortunate to get to know him as a human being over the years. And so I opened for him this year for a couple shows in Delaware and Maryland. And he very specifically said, he's like, I know you live, you know, it's the coast that you live on. He's like, but I know that you're a headliner. And so if I don't mean to insult you by asking if you would be, you know, the opening act on these shows. And I'm like, it is the opposite of I'm not like the very idea that
Emo opened for Weird Al.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
So like, that's really cool. You know what I mean?
Yes. I am to emo as emo is to Weird Al. I am emo's emo, you know? I saw them at Carnegie Hall, the final date of their tour in 2022.
Okay, that was my first Weird Al show.
Wow.
And I do have tickets for his upcoming in June, which is the full show. But that tour was so cool. It was no covers.
Yeah.
It was like almost acoustic, intimate. And I took my kids with me.
Oh yeah.
So that was their first experience. I mean, they've listened to Weird Al since they were tiny. So it was so cool. And having Emo there, Emo gives me a shout out personally and the club and by name on the Weird Al show. And my kids looked at me the way they looked at me. Like, oh my God.
It's like the TV said their name.
My dad just got mentioned on a Weird Al stage.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. And that show,
always remember that.
Oh, that's beautiful. The encore to that show. I mean, not to make this all just a Weird Al emo love fest, but it could be. The way that show, like you said, no covers and like no parodies, just all originals until the encore, where my understanding is he always will do a straight ahead cover song, like not a parody. And at Carnegie Hall, he did "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," and just a beautiful rendition of it. And then for the final piece, he did a mashup of all of his most popular.
He did a polka medley. Like he always did, like for like covers and stuff. He did that with his own covers.
And then the end of it ends with Yoda, and in the middle of Yoda, it becomes this like tribal chant that I couldn't even tell you if it lasted for an hour or 5 minutes.
I don't think we got the Yoda.
Interesting.
I don't remember.
It's possible that you just blacked out and you're still in that dimension now. But yeah.
Was that every show?
That my understanding is that it is, but I also know that they piece by piece add more and more to it. So depending, it's possible that you might have seen,
or maybe they started it and because they like broke off in the middle or something.
Could be. Regardless, the point is, yes, emo opens for Weird Al, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to open for emo, one of my heroes. And this is all to say, I am no longer, if I ever was, which I probably was, precious about like, I'm a headliner, the idea that I won't perform, there's a joke I heard once. I don't know if it's Jackie Mason or just some old Jew, I'm a Jew, I can say it. I shouldn't either. Don't say it. If anybody's listening, anybody Jewish listening? Okay.
Hanukkah.
The joke is there's these two old Jewish comedians talking, and one of them says, "Where are you working this weekend?" And he says, "Well, I'm not, because they offered me $1,200, but I won't do it for less than $1,500." So, and they're like, "Okay, so you're staying home for zero?" And I feel like that's the way that I feel is if I was like, I'm gonna hold out for this weekend, I'm a headliner, and that attitude is important sometimes. Like if I remember when I started working at colleges, somebody, a mentor was like, never do a gig at a college for less than this amount of money, because then that'll set your rate. And then you'll only get to do gigs for, if you only do it for a couple $100, then they'll be like, oh, well, this guy does gigs for a couple $100. Right. And there was an old comedian who told me once, he's like, I could be had for a couple $100, but I don't want anyone to know that I could be had for a couple $100. And when college gigs could pay 1,000, 2,000, many thousands. And so this is all to say, when I'm here like visiting my girlfriend's family, my family now, I'm like thrilled to get to spend time with them, and I'm also thrilled to get to spend time here at my my comedy family home. And like whether it's to just hang out, do a podcast, see a friend do a show, and if there's room on the show, like it doesn't take away anything from me to do a guest set on my friend Felipe's show, or to feature like I think I featured for Bobcat Goldthwait last year, and like he's another guy who like I would pay to see him. I would to get paid to work with him. Like that's a dream as well. Like it's fine.
That speaks a lot about your passion for this industry too. That you can have been in this industry for it's not 22 years. Sounds like and headline, be on as many shows, tonight shows, performed as many places as you have, and still be able to get excited about opening for people that you've respected and looked up to,
Oh yeah. I mean, as long as they're alive, I want to experience. I mean, it's fun. It's too, like, I remember when I started out in Boston,
East Coast has a lot of showcase shows.
Yes.
Right. So you do get like this comic and this, you don't, it does, like I said, it's always been standard, so it's just a cool element to be able to add.
Absolutely. And just, I remember when I started, I wanted to know, I took in all the comedy that I could. I bought all the comedy albums. I like watched all the local comedy shows. Like I was like, I know everybody. And then as I got a little older, like new comedians kept popping up everywhere. And I'm like, oh no, I don't, I'm like whack-a-mole trying to like learn them all. And I'm like, oh no, there's so many. And like now, of course, like the same way with, when my grandmother was a child, she could see every movie. Literally one movie would come out a week and she'd go see it. And like now, like I have the desire to see like every good movie, TV show, podcast, song, comedy, like everything, but it can't be done. Like there's no way to experience everything that you would love. You can't see, because you can only do one thing at a time. Like whether you're making comedy, making music, making art, and then taking in, reading books, like whatever you're doing. And so now I'm just like, okay, well, I'm excited now. It used to be, I felt threatened when I saw like a new funny comedian, when I was young and like inexperienced, but had a bigger ego about it. And I'm like, no, my ego's still pretty big, but I deserve it now. But at the time I was dumb to have such a big ego, but now I'm smart to have a big ego. I'm correct. But at the time I was like, man, these new people, like I kind of had the dumb attitude that, of like, hey, I was here first, but now you're new and funny and young, and that's not fun. And you're getting things that I'm not getting, like, let alone I don't even want all those things. But hey, why are you writing for a show that I didn't apply to? How come you get something that I didn't want, but I'm jealous because I want something, whatever it might be. But now, like, I do shows all over, wherever I can in New York City where I live. And some of the clubs are booking, there's people who are just starting doing comedy, and they're so good. There's so much good comedy. There's so much bad comedy. There's so much people learning, you win some, you learn some, but there's so many people that I'm like, wow, I've never seen you before and you're so funny. And that's a joy to it, because the point is I do comedy because I love comedy.
It also comes down to what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of person, this isn't comedian, do you want to be the kind of person that's going to be excited for your friend's success and encourage people and be there to shake their hand and say, or do you want to be the kind of person who is going to, stand in somebody's way, or who's going to frown and get mad that somebody was more successful than you quicker?
Oh, yeah. I used to get jealous of people who got things that I also had gotten. I was like, hey, how come they're getting a thing that I had but don't have anymore right now, or whatever it might be. But now I'm like, oh, yeah, it's just whatever I can do, I want to do. And I want everyone to succeed on their own merits.
I've always said people would rather help you fail than watch you succeed. And, I will say just watch people succeed and just be there to shake their hand. That's all you have to. You don't, even if you're not,
or just bump their fist. You don't have to shake it.
You don't have to touch them anymore.
Yeah, you can just wave.
First time I saw a fist bump was L.A. When I first went to L.A. and I had never seen it. And I was like, at first I was like, God, everybody's so impersonal. They don't, because it's a big handshaking. Nice to meet. Nobody. It's like fist bump, fist bump, fist bump. And then somebody explained to me that it's like, hey, they're working. So it's like a lot of people, it's a germ thing. They don't want to get the germs, get sick. And, and this is way before. I mean, this is,
oh yeah,
COVID and stuff like
that. But COVID was really great for the fist bump industry.
Yeah, it really helped that. Oh, you want to do it now too? Perfect. No more awkward handshakes.
Yes.
I am the awkward handshake. I'm like, I'm not gonna do. We're gonna,
Oh yeah.
At this point.
Yes.
I want to touch on something. Go back to something you touched on very briefly.
Please.
First, I want to say that, man, you're very smart, and intelligence is not lost in your act. You really bring like just unique, funny, like if they're. And smart, and I don't even think that you're trying to. You're just a very unique person.
I don't follow you. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know how. I guess I do know how I could try, but yeah, no, I'm. If anything, I would try not to.
So I find it interesting that you said that you started with music.
Yes.
You were playing music before you got into comedy. Was it always funny songs, or were you like, when did you start playing music?
Sure. I was 4. My parents were both music teachers, and so I was made to, or strongly encouraged. The way that my mom tells me.
High school?
No, like 4 years old. Yeah.
Your parents, like, what did they teach? Where?
My parents were 4 years old when I was 4. We were all the same age. It's hard. We time travel, big time travel family. I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't understand because we were all on the same age as my parents. We're amoebas. We're just one being. My mom taught elementary school education, elementary school music ed, and my dad was a high school band director and also taught private clarinet, saxophone, and flute lessons out of our basement. And my mom eventually retired, and then she taught private piano lessons as well. But when I was growing up, my mom taught elementary instrumental music, and then my dad taught high school, and then they had me play the violin.
So your whole life, you have grown up in a house listening to some stages of horrible people learning, but probably a lot of really wonderful music.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely.
Not from the radio, not on just hearing.
Oh, yeah.
Music.
Live music was in the house. My mom would, be practicing a lot. The trombone was one of her main instruments. Wow. And my mom's parents, her father was also a music teacher.
Trombone?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I did that for a month in school. I'm like, this one's not for me.
Fair enough. It's not for everyone. It is for Bonnie. That's my mom. Tromboni. That's not what they called her. But my grandfather, her father, he was a multi-instrumentalist. So he would always be playing a lot of classical piano and other, wind instruments. There was a lot of, music was just kind of, a friend of mine was an anthropology major in college, and he told me, I don't know if this is a theoretical thing or if there was a real society that he was telling me about that had no word for music, no concept of music, but not because they didn't have music, but because music infused their entire society in a way that it was you ask a fish, how's the water? And the fish is like, what's water? It's the only thing that's there. And in our society, there are some things that are musical that we don't think about, in a court, where the judge comes in and the bailiff is like, oh yay, oh yay, oh yay. It's oh, that's a musical thing. That's just a chant that's kind of part of the fabric of the legal gathering proceedings.
I think that's been converted to all rise.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel similarly, because music was music is a language that I started learning very early. I would have a violin lesson once a week. And then pretty early on in my childhood, every Saturday I would go all day music lessons, an orchestra, theory classes.
What was the first instrument?
Violin. Okay. Violin from when I was 4. And I didn't love it. I didn't like it. I had to do it, and I wasn't.
Did you switch instruments or add to?
I added so I was made to play the violin throughout my childhood, I think up until senior year of high school. And then I did play a little bit in the orchestra in college, and I joined an a cappella group, and I got more into singing, and I joined a chamber choir in college. But guitar was the instrument that I fell in love with when I was about 15.
What was your first guitar?
So the first one that I ever played was my friend Ari's guitar, because he just came and visited me, and while he was in the bathroom, I was just bling, bling, bling.
Is it acoustic?
It is an acoustic. Yeah, I don't remember what that one was.
Sure.
And then my dad had an old one that he let me have, and then I got an electric, and I don't remember what kind that was, but I don't play electric that much. The first kind of guitar that I had that I remember what it is a Larrivee, which is it has a really beautiful sound, and also the pressure and temperature changes really didn't treat it well where I lived, so it would crack once in a while, but now I have an Ovation, and it's just a very, very basic,
acoustic.
This one's an acoustic electric, but I mostly use it acoustically.
You can plug it.
And I got a mandolin at one point, which is fun.
See, I started with the bass, and then I was able to switch to an acoustic guitar, but I was always lost on the electric guitar. I don't know if it's a pick or it's just a style, but it's definitely a different style between an acoustic and electric guitar.
Yeah, you can definitely. I think it's good to learn on an acoustic, and then usually you can transfer that to an electric. You're very unique and special that you can't. But
I'm not as comfortable.
There.
Maybe I like to play those open strings on the acoustic a little bit, and I don't use a pick, and so just for me that. But I didn't take music as far as I I made a choice at a point, and I said, I'm just going to go pursue comedy.
And so, yeah, I had that also, but maybe around the same time, maybe a little later. But I definitely, when I was 15, taught myself guitar and just started playing with my friends and fooling around. And like mostly I had some silly songs. Like I loved They Might Be Giants. I loved They Might Be Giants and Ani DeFranco. And I did not play the guitar as well as Ani DeFranco. And I don't know if my songs were, as thought out as They Might Be Giants, but I feel like stylistically, I was probably closer to that. I just had, weird, quirky ideas. And some of them were like funny on purpose, and some of them were not funny on purpose, but were accidentally. And so some of them were, I really meant to be like maybe more sincere, like I wrote some love songs, even though I'd at that point never experienced love. I wrote one song, it was called You. And it was like about, when you're not near to me, I miss you. And like, I was like, I could play this for anybody because it's not, I don't have, just like insert girl when I meet her. Yeah.
It was about nobody?
It was about nobody.
That's so funny.
And then I did write.
Like faceless love songs?
Yeah. And then.
You should write a song about that.
Yeah. That's, on one side it was that. And on the other side, I did write a few songs about like girls and then women as I grew up that I had like crushes on, but I still didn't have, actual real life romantic experiences with, though. I think that those had like something more to them because they were actually coming from a place of, emotional authenticity and longing. But a lot of those songs were just funny. And so when I was looking to play them around Boston, I found a comedy club, the Comedy Studio, and I called them, and it was just the owner, Rick, who answered the phone, and he's like, yeah, you can have 5 minutes at our club. And I went and did, 2 really short songs and talked in between and around. And the very first show I ever did, I followed Jonathan Katz. You remember?
Oh,
yeah, he was, famous at the time for Dr. Katz,
right.
Professional Therapist, the cartoon on Comedy Central. And he also ended his set with a song that was funny. And I go on right after him. I'm like, okay, well, it's my first time and I'm here to do a song that I hope is funny. And I'm following the most famous person who just did a thing that is better than I'm going to do. And and people laughed but I was like, I'm serious. I'm concerned, and.
Did you say that?
I did.
That's so funny. That's so raw. People are going to go for that. You expose yourself and show your vulnerability. People will appreciate it.
And I see that now. And at the time I'm just like, truly, that wasn't what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
I was truly just like, oh boy. And then afterwards, I was like, wow, the songs went fine. And I was like, and also people were laughing at the things that I was saying. And that's like when, the switch flipped. And I was like, over the next couple of years, I was like, maybe I could do that on purpose. Because I did it by accident.
All right, welcome back to the comedy, to wherever we are. Welcome back to Right Now at the Comedy Club, here at the Comedy Club at Kansas City. Again, follow us across the board at thecomedyclubkc.com. Make sure and get your tickets for Kevin Nealon, Hannibal Buress, Joe List, all those wonderful people coming up right here at the Comedy Club. All right, we're with Myq. Myq, you just got, you're talking about playing music. You got into a club for the first time. Followed Jonathan Katz and getting off of there and thinking maybe I should convert. It was putting my energy into comedy. Did you keep the music in that conversion, or how long did it take you to put down the guitar?
I did a little bit. So I'd say 1999 was the very first time I performed that show with Jonathan Katz. And I'd say 2002 is the first time that I started really pursuing comedy, going to open mics. And so I would go, let's say, get 5 minutes on an open mic. I had a Martin backpacker guitar, like a little, like no body, just like a straight, like rod of guitar. And the
neck?
Yeah, just the neck. And by that point I realized, I'm like, okay, songs with like repeating choruses, those are out for a 5-minute comedy set. And so I had a couple of like 30-second to 1-minute songs. And so I would go to an open mic and I would do probably like 4 minutes of horrible jokes or horrible things that I hoped were jokes. And maybe one would work or a couple. And then I would close each open mic set with, one song that did work.
What is that like? Because I have experienced that. What is that like going from being a songwriter to then writing comedy songs and then figuring out how to actually play them in a comedy environment. The editing, just the whole approach, and that realization of, as you mentioned, I can't just sit here and repeat the chorus 4 times.
Yeah, I think something that would eventually like sort of come through in my joke writing was at play in the songwriting. I think the processes are very similar for me as far as like, word economy and editing and like, what does it have to be? Like, if
funny.
Yeah. That's let me write that. Hold on. It's got to be funny. Okay. Perfect. Well, I got to go. I have a new career to start. But sincerely, like, when I would play, songs at like a talent show at summer camp, or at a coffee shop at my college that wasn't specifically comedy, like, a chorus is enjoyable, There's a quote I love from a poet named Robert Haas. It's repetition makes us feel secure, variation makes us feel free. And like too much security in comedy, and it's music. It's not like there needs to be more variation, more freedom, more surprise and mystery. So I figured out how to take, my songs, and if they had repeating choruses, I would change. I'd be like, well, it's got to be different next time. I have to switch it up the same way that I would eventually, like, let's say a song had a big punchline at the end. Let's say it's a minute long and there's got to be a good laugh at the end. But I'm like, well, there's got to be laughs before that too. Otherwise, people might like walk out. People, like, I'm not going to listen to a song for a whole minute without laughing. And so I feel like similarly, I would have jokes that I'm like, okay, this joke has a punchline at the end that people are supposed to laugh at, but sometimes they don't. So I'm going to add tags and I'm going to add jokes to the setup, and I'm just going to like pack it as full as possible so that if an audience laughed everywhere they were supposed to, everywhere I wanted them to at this joke, there'd be like 17 laughs. And so that's what I'm shooting for, like in a salary negotiation, like, how much money do you want to work here? I'd like 17 laughs. And like, we can do 8.5. Can you do 8.5? I'm like, 8.5 is great. I'll take 8.5. I'll take 8.5 laughs. Thank you so much. I'm like, but even if it's 3, I take 3, like I'll take 1. I'm like, aim for 17. You get 1. Great. But if you aim for 1, then you get -3 and, people throw things at you. So I feel like that's what I did with the songs, is I like trimmed them down, added enough to them, to make them as funny or interesting or, raise the tension like before laughs happened, as much as I could, like similar to writing a joke. Like, if you have, let's say you're a storytelling comedian, you have a long story, like you don't want to have 5 minutes of empty air, unless it's like, the most intriguing story you've ever told, and be like, wow, what's going to happen? And then there's a big laugh at the end. But most people like to have more than one laugh in a comedy set.
I absolutely love that saying, by the way. And even just the second half of it, but the whole thing, variation makes you feel free.
Oh, yeah.
Repetition makes you feel comfortable. Variation makes you feel free. What? I love that, because in comedy, you want to go somewhere where they're not expecting. You want the bait and switch, and you want to watch comedy like, where is he going? In music, you want to know where it's going. That repetition does make you feel comfortable. That's why we sing our favorite songs in those choruses, and we know it's coming. Let's get back to it,
And I think some of the greatest comedy, like if you listen to your favorite comedy over and over, it becomes music-like. Like I could listen to Mitch Hedberg albums all day, or Paul F. Tompkins all day. Like people who's like just the timbre of their voice, the cadence of their speech, it's like, it is musical, and it's beautiful. And it's obviously, if you know the joke that's coming, you're not going to laugh at it the same as if you don't. But like, it's kind of the thing, they say like musicians all want to be, rock stars want to be comedians, and comedians want to be rock stars. And like,
Isn't that funny?
There can be, this beautiful confluence therein where, some of the greatest, it's so funny that musical comedy is both so disrespected sometimes because of people's impressions of it, but also that some of the greatest art in the world, like Reggie Watts, like nobody's doing what he is doing in comedy or music, right. or Bo Burnham or Tim Minchin or Garfunkel and Oates, or whoever there's wonderful people who are making a combination of music and comedy. Like, and I did actually, so in addition to doing stand-up, yeah.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, you're good.
I just had I spaced a name. I'll just let it go.
Oh, you're fine. But check out Space a Name. Love the musical comedy of Space a Name.
I've even had him here. I feel terrible.
Oh, but he doesn't know. Yeah.
I want to mention. He is a guitar comic.
Rob Paravonian.
No, he doesn't do songs. He plays it as like an undertone.
Oh, Nick Thune.
Nick Thune.
Yeah.
I'm so.
Of course. Oh, Nick. Yeah, wonderful.
It's a different kind of musical comedy, and I love it.
Oh yeah.
Because it is like a song. You have this melody with these punchlines and these jokes, and your jokes are your lyrics, but all it is an undertone. And I really appreciate that style.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, Dimitri Martin does, similar things as well, and they're great. I feel like people used to, and maybe still do, but certainly when I was younger, like there was this idea of like quote unquote purity in comedy that like, oh, it's a person with a microphone. In the past, a man with a microphone, no women with microphones, no non-binary people with microphones. But a person with a microphone, that's stand-up comedy. But also like, who cares? Like if you're making, beautiful music, like I used to have a joke. Like, so my friend Micah Sherman and I, so in addition to doing stand-up, Micah and I, starting around 2005, like started writing songs together, and we recorded an album, and we just like would host shows. And actually the first time I opened for emo, it was Micah and I were doing, it was the Alternative Comedy Festival, and we were just playing a couple of our weird comedy songs. And a thing that I would say, we would talk and kind of do like two-person stand-up in between the songs. A joke that I would say is like, who doesn't love music? Like nobody doesn't love music. And who doesn't love comedy? Nobody. And so who doesn't love musical comedy? Everybody. For whatever reason, oh man, music and comedy, everyone loves them, but keep like peanut butter and chocolate, but keep them apart.
You know who doesn't like musical comedy? Comedians.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah, but like
everybody else.
Stephen Lynch is a beautiful musician and has really funny songs, and like it's not cheating. It's like whatever skills you have, like go for it. I mean, if you can do it in the way that you want to and is artful and is or don't be. Do whatever you want. Who cares? Nobody's competing. Don't compete with then you win. Whatever. But yeah, I love I love music in my life still. Like I still write songs and record them mostly just for fun.
Did you ever take any instruments besides the guitar to a comedy stage?
Other, string, I can do any stringed instrument. I have a ukulele occasionally, or if there's one around. And sometimes there's a club with a piano, and I can do that.
You've never played music on on my stage.
I have not.
No, I mean that's not.
I will tomorrow. Yeah. There's one in the green room. I like noodling around with that. Yeah, I'll bring it out tomorrow.
Oh really?
I'm okay. No, I won't. Find out.
Oh,
yeah.
I've never seen you actually. So you still will pull music and include every once in a while.
I mean, honestly, if there's certainly if there's an instrument on the stage.
If you want to play it tomorrow, I have a much better guitar at home.
Oh, okay.
I can bring it.
Truly not urgent. Yeah. Yeah. If it's here, hey, you want to bring it? I'm not, no, I don't.
I got a hard shell the whole night.
Ooh, I like a hard shell. And a turtle in it. Power. Yeah. So mostly these days music is for just really kind of the way that it started for me. It really worked out beautifully that I was like, oh, I love making music, so I want to make it my career because that's what find the thing that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm like, oh great, I don't want to work. And so I purposely didn't major in music when I went to college because I didn't want it to become work. I didn't want it to become homework. I didn't want to resent it, but then I was like, I think I can do it for my career. But then I just organically shifted to comedy, and I was like, this is great. I likened it to like an open relationship where I'm like, okay, I'm now married to comedy, but like it's open. Comedy doesn't have a problem with me still seeing music on the side. I can have my musical guma, or whatever sexist term you wish. But yeah, I love just having the guitar at home, having other instruments at home, and man, recording technology is so advanced now, and I just use, put things into GarageBand, put effects on things, like harmonize over myself. I did put out just like pretty much a straight music album, maybe like in 2016 or so.
Really?
That I called Many Musics.
Okay.
And it's on Spotify. And some of the songs are funny.
Do you have a musician name or just under your name?
It's just my name. It's on the same Spotify platform channel as my comedy albums.
Okay.
There's like some of them are fun. Here's one.
Did you ever hear Bill Hicks' album?
What's that?
Bill Hicks. Did you ever hear his music album?
I think once. Yeah.
Very slow country, almost like
Yeah.
one man.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a song on there. I'll link it to you. It is like, as a comic, it's one of just it cuts so deep about just relationships and stuff like that, and just it's really good. I'll play it for you when we're done here.
Cool. Also, shout out to, of course, Doug Stanhope has an album with Henry Phillips playing beautiful music in the background.
Great.
Another,
I know. Yes,
his music is incredible. He's so talented and so funny, and it's a beautiful confluence. And then Hedberg on his first album had a bassist in the background as well.
Love that. I love that. We did that here. A show recently, Jazz and Jokes, where we had a jazz band
that's really cool,
and accompanied like the comics and stuff like that. It was
a
lot of fun.
I love stuff like that. There's I did a show recently. A friend of mine, Zahid Devji, has a show in New York that he co-hosts with a guy named Neil Ghosh. And Neil is just on stage for a lot of the show with like a keyboard and has like a loop machine. And like he does a set, but then he's also like, you know, kind of co-hosting and making music and like doing like little, you know, but not just that, but like fun sound effects, fun things. And I had him on for my set as well. And it's really fun to collaborate like musically and comedically with people. So let's get that jazz band here tomorrow in a hard shell.
They'll be here Tuesday for New Year's.
Oh, well, I'll come back.
All right, be here.
Very cool. Yeah.
You said you've been awesome segue. You said I don't even know what capacity, but I was asking you topics that you'd want to talk about, and you mentioned that you've been getting into advice lately. What is like getting it, giving it?
So when I growing up, I would read the newspaper very limitedly. You know, I'd read the comic strips, I would read like the horoscopes, and I would read the like Dear Abby Ann Landers, you know, like just classic advice columns. So that goes back to literally as long as I can remember, like single digit childhood age. And then when I was in college in Boston, I remember that was the first time that I was reading the Boston Phoenix, which is kind of like, I don't know, the Village Voice of Boston, like the local indie paper at the time. And they had, that was the first place that I read Dan Savage's advice column, Savage Love. Do you know Dan Savage?
No.
So he's had his column since like the early 90s. And so he started his just kind of as a lark, I guess, because he had a friend who was starting a newspaper, and Dan was like, "You should have an advice column in the newspaper. People like advice columns." And the guy's like, "Well, you should do it." And Dan is a gay man, and he's like, all the advice that had been given up till that point, you know, up through the early 90s was like very heteronormative, very like, you know, probably homophobic when it came up. And so Dan's like, I'm going to start, you know, giving advice to straight people with the same kind of disdain that all the advice columnists so far have been giving to gay people. But then it sort of morphed into like a real big thing over the past several decades. And he has a podcast now called the Savage Lovecast. And it's just the only podcast that I listen to without fail every week, all the time. I pay for the bonus episodes.
Really?
Yeah, it's recommended. And, you know, he has guests on that, like when topics come up that are not in his wheelhouse, like, you know, he's he's a gay white male. And so he has his own experience. And then if people come on and have questions about, you know, other genders, other races, other, you know, kinks, other, you know, sexual orientations that he's not a part of or a party to. And so I love that. And then I started listening to or reading both, like there's a Dear Prudence podcast, and there's one, a column called Ask a Manager and Captain Awkward. And so I take in a lot of advice columns. I have a good friend, Liz Glazer, who's a super comedian, and she and I have done some live shows and some podcasts and various incarnations that we call Liz and Myq Give Advice. Yeah. And I wrote the theme song for it, and the theme song goes, Liz and Myq give advice to themselves, each other, and anyone who likes. And so we would sometimes have like a lightning round from people in the crowd.
Could you sing that for us?
Liz and Myq give advice to themselves, each other, and anyone who likes. Yeah,
I'll
send you the file. So that's part of it. You can put that in there. It might not be in the right key, but and so here's I guess the place that I've come from is, I mean, and maybe this is being socialized as a man in our society, a white man, like I have done I've grown a lot to the point where now if people share their problems with me, I know that they're not always looking for advice. Like sometimes people are looking for a cheerleader. Sometimes they're just looking to be heard. Sometimes they're looking for a coach. So it's good to find out, like, what are you looking for? Do you want to be hugged, helped, or heard? You know, those are other ways of looking at it. But before I learned these different paradigms,
What do you want to be?
I mean, right now, heard, I guess. So, you know, yeah. We're doing great. No, I want to be all these things.
Oh my God, you're so funny.
I appreciate you. So my impulse used to be, you told me something about your life, and I'd be like, you know what you should do? Like, here's what you should do. You know, and I feel like it's an impulse that a lot of us have, and some of us, you know, are perhaps wise or kind enough to have learned, be like, oh, that might not be what people want in a moment, because it's almost always, it seems clearer from the outside what a person should do. I had a friend once come to me. She's like, I have this real bad situation with my boyfriend. I don't know what to do. And they told me what was going on. I was like, well, if someone came to you with that problem, what would you tell them to do? And they're like, oh, I'd tell them to break up, obviously. It's like, but what do I do? You know? And like, it's difficult to give ourselves advice. So I think that was my interest in it, is I just want to, I mean, I think at the core, I want to help. Or maybe out of, you know, the ego part of me is like, I want to help. I want to be helpful. I want to be the one to solve problems.
We're going to help you help.
I would love it.
So we went to social media.
Yes.
Like, surprise, you know, like you don't.
People need help?
We went to social media and we asked
Where did that piece of paper come from?
Where did this magically come from? You had no idea this was coming.
Wow. I am embarrassed.
Really thrown on me, man.
I refuse. I walk up. Yeah.
Dude, I asked you if you wanted me to do this.
I Gallagher out of here. Please.
And we asked some people if they had any advice they would like to ask for you.
I'm excited.
So we had a few people. We also had some people just ask some normal questions. We have done that in the past, so we broke it up. We're gonna do some advice, then we'll just do a few fan questions, and yeah. All right. Our first advice for you, Myq Kaplan, it comes from Alex Kransberg. Advice on eating vegan while on the road.
Absolutely. Well, here is a joke that I tell that will offer some real information as well. Sometimes people say, is it difficult being vegan on the road? And the answer is there's almost always options. Like there's always going to be an Asian restaurant where you can get some vegan options. There's always going to be a supermarket which has a produce section. There's always going to be a local park where you can graze on the grass. And I like that timed perfectly with you taking a drink. Good work. Not spit taking it. But sincerely, somebody once asked me as well, do you think you could write like a vegan travel guide? And I was like, I'm thinking of it.
Oh, that would be great.
And I'm going to call it.
For vegans.
Yeah, Google vegan town name. And I mean, sincerely, that's what I do. Like any city where I'm performing, like we're in Kansas City, you know, home of barbecue, home of like a lot of non-vegan food, but also Cafe Gratitude. And, you know, the local pizza place has vegan cheese. You know, there's like society has shifted enough that, you know, if you're worried about not being able to eat vegan on the road, like that's a worry from like when I was traveling cross country in like 2005 with a buddy, and we were in like rural Louisiana. And we stopped at a place and I was looking at the menu and I was like, I don't know, can I just do spaghetti without the meat sauce? And they're like, the meat's in the sauce. And I was like, okay, what about vegetables? They're like, we don't really have those. And I like flipped and I was like, oh, it says you have pizza toppings for the pizza? They're like, oh yeah. I was like, those are vegetables. They have vegetables. They just call them pizza toppings. So you have to do a little research. But truly, Google. There's also an app called Happy Cow. The Happy Cow app shows you all the vegan, vegetarian, and vegan option having restaurants in your area. So that's the practical advice is you used your computer to send in this question, so use it to find the answer.
Perfect. And then I tag team. This was from the questions. I went ahead and just tagged it on to the vegan.
Yes.
Ryan Radecki, you mentioned you're in Kansas City often, a follower of yours. Have you found any vegan barbecue in Kansas City?
I'm sure that I have at some point, but I don't remember. So pretty good.
Probably not worth remembering.
Pretty good content.
Yeah. Bria Langworthy, advice on dealing with creative blocks, especially when you want to be consistent with creating new art or new material, but struggle to get the ball rolling sometimes.
Sure. There's an author named W. Somerset Maugham, and I'm going to paraphrase. I should memorize this because I love this quote, but the basic premise is he says, "I only sit down to write when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 a.m. on the dot." Like, sincerely, and from my own life, I remember in 2006, I had a 5-minute set that I was like, this is the funniest set that I've ever come up with in the 4 years that I've been doing comedy. I was like, have I peaked? Will I not be able to create any comedy that's better than this 5 minutes about snakes on a plane? That was the greatest comedy that I'd come up with at the time. And then it felt like months. For months, I was like in a dry period, in a slump. Like I was still like writing down ideas. I would still like record ideas, but I didn't feel like any of the ideas were coming to fruition in the same way that those were. Am I done? And then 6 months later, I had another joke that was as good, that I was as excited about as I had been before. And I was like, oh, and that was from a seed that I'd planted like 6 months earlier. So I'd say you have to sadly not worry about, the results. Not worrying about the results will lead to better results. So whatever your process is, like if you only jot down things as they occur to you and you don't sit down to write every day at a certain time, like you don't have to, but try it. Try sitting down every morning, when you wake up, if whatever you do first thing, like try to have that be like the artist's way, calls it morning pages, and just sometimes it's just like, it could be gratitude journaling. It could be just getting out whatever, demons need to come out. It could be writing a letter to a loved one. It could be trying to write jokes. It could be anything, but just put, pen to page, pencil to page, fingers to keyboard, and write, 3 pages, write 750 words. I use 750words.com. Write 1,000 words. Just write every day.
Is that a real thing?
That's a real thing. 750words.com. It's pretty cool. They sort of analyze the themes of what you do. You don't have to. You could just write with your own pad or other computer device. But yeah, I mean, starting out, I understand there's these conflicting ideas where you want to be you want to have new things, but you also want to do well. And, you sometimes in order to do well, you feel like you have to do your old thing. So it's important to just have places where it's okay to quote unquote fail, places where you feel good experimenting. You can, whether you want to write things out in advance, just write a bunch of stuff that's garbage. Be like, I'm going to do a bunch of garbage and then maybe look through it. No, some of this is treasure in this trash.
I like your answer in this is because I think to just maybe it's even just paraphrasing what you're saying or just to add on to it, like if you're a writer and you're blocked writing, but you want to then try playing music for a minute. Or if you want to write comedy, but you have a block, just write a letter. Just do something to get your brain moving and get the juices flowing. Do something different. If you're a sketch artist, try painting for a minute, just to unlock the juices and stimulate your brain, and you will eventually stimulate the side that you're looking for.
Unlock the juices. Yeah. Even if you think you have writer's block, just start writing.
Giggity.
I have writer's block, and then just be like, I have writer's bleak, I have writer's blanc, I have writer's blank, I have Matt LeBlanc, and eventually like, oh, I've got Matt LeBlanc trapped in my basement, whatever you got, and now you have a fun new story, and then you go out and kidnap Matt LeBlanc, and then you try to get all the other friends and be like, why won't you be my friends? Like, why don't I have any friends? Well, now you have a lot of friends trapped in your basement. And that's how you write a joke if you want. You can have that one.
One of the best brains.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Taylor, you did an episode of Louis. What advice did Louis C.K. give you during that period, if any?
Good question. Also, Louis, God rest his soul, is I just want to credit another comedian who, when I was in Edinburgh 2018, That was around when like the first, news stories were coming out about Louis's inappropriate behaviors. And but he's so influential to so many comedians. He comes up in stories a lot and questions on podcasts. And so Reese Nicholson, super funny comedian, great Netflix special, Australian comedian, looks like Tilda Swinton and Conan at the same time. And so funny. Reese one time brought up Louis while we were in our green room and was like, Louis C.K., God rest his soul. I was like, oh, that's the perfect way to do it. So just that asterisk offered. Louis, super influential and very kind to me to have me on the show and had me open for him for a while. And while I was opening for him, I remember the one very interesting and I feel like valuable piece of advice, valuable in many ways, that he offered me was just about talk to other comedians about money. Talk to other comedians about what you're getting paid for gigs, because when you're not being when there's no transparency, that benefits, the rich and powerful, like, the club owners, your Dustin Kaufmans and such. And, you're rich and powerful, Dustin Kaufmans, like the giant.
Thanks for listening to this week's.
Help, I'm trapped. No. Sincerely, like, you're wonderful, and like it's such a weird thing. Like show business, obviously, there is a business aspect to it, and the goal is to be in business with. It's a symbiotic relationship. Like I remember the very first time I performed at the Comedy Studio, Rick Jenkins, the owner, thanked me for performing, and I'm like, thanking me? Like, what are you thanking me for? Like I'm nothing. Like I'm barely any. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, he's thanking me. And I'm like, oh, and now I have something, we both have something of value to offer each other, like be it stage time or a comedian for your stage. And similarly, like you have a club and an audience, I have comedy, and we are here together, working together. And it's, again, not a competition. We both, like a rising tide lifts all ships. And so basically Louis offered to me that he's like, if you're bringing in a lot of people, you should be getting a lot of money. You should be, if there's a lot of, like, it should just be commensurate, and that was, I think at the time I was starting to headline places that like, oh yeah, if you sell out these shows, then you get these bonuses. If you bring in these people, and so just like the nitty gritty of like, you can have a door deal straight ahead, or you can have like, various guarantees versus door deals, and just like something that, make sure that you're not just being only gracious to get the stage time, and that other people are, benefiting without you benefiting as well.
I want to touch on that, what you just said a little bit too, though.
Yeah, please.
And first off, I really love that what your answer to that is he taught you a little bit about the business and how to make money and the transparency and a lot of that. And again, like with the club owners and stuff like that. And I think probably at one time, I mean, it's not even at one time, it was a comedy club driven industry, and
yes,
it was an industry driven industry, but it's not anymore. It is a comic driven industry. I think clubs should be not just grateful, but honored to have great talent working for them and thankful to have clubs shouldn't be holding leverage. To me, I think there should be a union that puts everybody on the same page, because the agent side of it is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And there's comics not getting work because just their agents are too greedy. And they don't even know how much work. And I think there should just be a level. If you sell this much, you get this much. When you start selling this much, it converts to and let everybody make money. That's that's me. I absolutely agree with the transparency. I just want to say that I think the industry's different now.
100%.
And the comics, especially because it's right there in the followings, and there's clubs can communicate. You can ask the agents for the numbers. It's very black and white. Are they selling tickets? What are we looking at? Even what can we expect going into it? And it's up to comics have the ability to create their own following now, to create their own path. They don't have to live in LA. They don't have to live in New York. All they have to do is sell tickets. And unfortunately, the being funny comes second in a lot of that, but I have to look at the funny first, especially for our weekends and stuff like that. But I understand that the industry was like that for a long time. It just ain't me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I know that you said that, and I'm not being defensive in it. I'm just saying I just think we should all be aware that it is a different time, and social media has changed so much of this industry that we live in.
Absolutely. And if I truly believed that you were a demonic overlord, I would have been like, what you have to do, everyone, is make sure that you're getting paid fairly, but not by Dustin. Dustin, of course, he knows exactly he does all the right things.
It's not.
No, I appreciate you. And truly, I think that there is like more of a fair and level playing field. Like, I think that you're right. The numbers exist now. The transparency exists. And I'm now in a new place where, like, when I started headlining in like 2010, let's say, I think that was like the first year that I was like headlining outside of New England, where I was living for most of my comedy career. And at the time, like, I didn't have a following, really. Some people had seen me on Last Comic Standing, and so some people were coming out because of that. But still, I was beholden to, like, performing at clubs that had built-in audiences that were like, oh, this guy was on this TV show, so he's going to come to our club, and hopefully you should come see him because we give you good comedians, even if you don't know who he is. And then, little by little, like, both the industry has changed in the way that you've expressed, where like, social media has like launched the careers of many incredible comedians, and also people who weren't comedians but are like, now I can fill a comedy club. And so, it's a fascinating thing.
You're gonna fill it Wednesday.
Which, I mean, power to you.
What are you doing Monday, man?
I mean, if I had that capacity as well, if I were, as TikTok famous as the most TikTok famous people, I'd do all the Mondays.
Well, I'll say that too. I know you joke about the people who weren't comedians but are doing clubs now. If comedians look at that pattern and look at the formula that's working for them, that's what they should be aspiring to do. And it used to be go out and showcase and try to feature and do this. I think a comic's first goal would be to get your social media to a point where you can go out and do one-nighters and just go do these midweek shows. Step one, go sell 100 tickets on a Wednesday or a Tuesday or a Thursday at whatever comedy club, because there's not a comedy club in the country who doesn't want to sell 100 tickets on a fucking Wednesday. And if you can get your foot in the door like that off your own accord, I mean, you don't have to sell 1,000 tickets. And you know what? You can make good money doing 100, 150 tickets on a Wednesday or a Thursday, because you can get that easy door deal, because it's easy money. We're going to open the doors. We're going to get a little bit of it. We're going to get the food and booze. You're going to put money in my servers' pockets. You can make 1,000, couple thousand just for, and go do it again in another town. That should be their first step. So
it sounds good.
I know poking fun at the ones converting, but look at the formula they're doing, and then for the ones who are aspiring and are comics first, it's just an example of how to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Our last advice is Katie Duncan. Best advice for dealing with critics, trolls, and haters.
I guess it depends where you're getting these. If they're online, close the laptop. I mean, because any attention, even negative attention, feeds them. And I consider myself a recovering argumentaholic. I used to on my Facebook, like now these days for Facebook and like all the social media, I'll like post a joke, and when I hardly will look at the responses. Like every once in a while I'll go back through on Facebook and be like, oh, like people said nice things, I'll respond. Used to be like, if let's say something went more viral than others, if it was about a controversial topic, a political topic, it's about, guns or what have you. Like, and there's people with very strong opinions on different sides, then people would sometimes weirdly, I mean, obviously the algorithm is powered by, outrage. And so when there are arguments, then like, oh, hey, everyone, look at this, look at this. I would then find myself going back and forth with people like who were not in good faith, trying to have meaningful political discussions. And so my way these days is if somebody like disagrees with a point that I'm making, I will be a human being and like try to express my opinion in a meaningful, reasonable, caring way, a respectful way. And if they do not do this, I'll give them one opportunity. If they do not do the same, then I will block or mute or at least stop responding and stop feeding that flame. And so that's absolutely an option. Like, I mean, if people are being hateful, if people are being mean, and you don't want to see that, like if it's online, block, block, mute, stop looking at it, stop responding to it, and hopefully that will be as simple as you need. I forget who I first heard this from, but it was if you turn the tables, you're still at the table. Like, even if you have like the biggest, most hilarious dunk, I mean, go ahead, like, screenshot it, post it somewhere else where they can't be tagged or see it, and like, have fun and at their expense if you want to. But I'd say otherwise, just keep making the comedy that you want to, keep making the art that you want to, and get it in front of the people. Like, usually for people to be seeing it that don't like it, that means that a lot of people have to be seeing it, because very few people, like, a person at an open mic does a job that nobody enjoys. Very few people are following them to be like, hey, that 5 minutes you did on a Tuesday night, in a bar that nobody was at, like, that was bad. Like, that's hardly happening. It's, for myself at least, I know it's only my like most viral things that get in front of people that are like, it's like the equivalent of like when a Comedy Central roast was happening, and they have like, before Nikki Glaser was as big as she was, or Amy Schumer or Anthony Jeselnik, like when they were like new, like unknowns to most people, like they were on those roasts because they were good. And so they were in front of people, and they were like famous people on the roast who were like, who even are you? Like, oh, I'm a good comedian. And so just if you're getting that backlash, that means that you're doing something that is touching people emotionally, that is moving people in ways. So feel good about that, and then don't respond. Don't look at it, block, mute, and or if you want to get, if it's, if they're treating like a human being and they just disagree with you, then feel free to have a peaceful conversation if the people address you in good faith. But if they don't, then get out of there.
I'm with that. Eliminate the haters, man. There comes a point in life where you just don't want to deal with it anymore. And if it's damaging, or maybe it's somebody you feel close to, but it's still a consistent form of negativity, it's okay to remove people from your life if it's for your own personal health. So block a phone call, block a social media follower. Just do whatever you need to do, because it's your world that you're living in.
Yeah. And as I believe the kids say, touch grass, get outside, call a friend, like do something positive that makes you feel good and connects you to people that you care about. Listen to a song that you like, and if it's in real life, then get out of there. Don't stay where people aren't treating you nicely.
All right, those are our advice. I have a couple quick questions. I'm going to only pick a couple of these because your act tonight triggered a memory of mine from like earlier comedy that, in a sense, it is right now. It won't be when we release it, but today it is Hanukkah. Mm-hmm. So I do want to bring it up. So I'm going to do two quick questions here, and then I want to just kind of wrap up with a quick conversation and see where you go. You want to do a fuck, murder, kill?
Sure.
All right. Myq Kaplan asks, FMK, Taylor Swift, Oprah Winfrey, Travis Kelce, fuck, murder, kill. Who do you choose?
Now, you're saying fuck,
F-
murder, kill,
F,
but
Mary.
yeah.
Mary kill.
Yeah. Yeah, how about you got to
We're
make
gonna
him
keep this-
fucking
sorry.
dead, murder, and kill.
It is
yeah.
Mary. Sorry. I just
Yeah.
wrote the F in. My brain is like, we're going to kill one of them.
Yeah. So
Maybe in your world, it's Mary.
yeah, Taylor Swift and Oprah and Travis Kelce. I mean, yeah, I don't love that I have to kill anybody, but of those, I feel like Travis Kelce is the one that I mean, he's the what has he done other, like, he's only famous because of Taylor Swift. So that's, I mean, like, just whoever had heard of him outside of this area where I am right now.
Touchdowns in Kansas City history as of Wednesday.
Well, I'm not gonna kill Oprah or Taylor Swift, so I have to look. I mean, I don't want to kill anybody, so I want to marry them all, and that's it. Marry. Just want to marry Taylor Swift and Kelce to Oprah. I want them all to be married. But I think, yeah, I guess I would marry Oprah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just that longevity. Okay, good.
I mean, yeah, she's a billionaire, so and she seems like a nice lady, so I'd be happy to marry to her.
Taylor.
That's true. Yeah, but I mean, look. Fine. Okay, I'll fuck Oprah. Fine.
Oprah's gonna talk you through it.
Yeah. I just want to marry them all. That's all.
All right.
I make my rules.
Josh Chaikin asks, I would love to know how you wrote and constructed your Mario Brothers act.
Sure. So this is the one that will be, if I am interpreting correctly, I've just filmed as a special. It is about my relationship with my girlfriend. She and I co-created it over the past, we've been together for 8.5 years, and I've been really hardcore working on this hour since probably like 2019-ish. And it will stream somewhere in 2025 if all goes according to plan. And it just, I guess the main answer is like a little bit at a time. Like the way that I started out, I would say that every joke that I wrote was just its own little snowflake, just one. And then occasionally I had a couple jokes that were on a similar topic, and I would piece them together and be like, okay, now this is like a little chunk, a little snowball. And then eventually it's bigger and bigger, and it's rolling down a hill, and it's an avalanche, and it's an ice sculpture. And in the beginning, and I talk about this in that show, that when I started, it was just these one-line ideas that eventually I was like, oh, I've written enough, I've written, if let's say there's, every minute has like a joke or a few jokes, right? So the hour has somewhere between 60 and several hundred jokes or joke ideas in it. And that means over the past 6 years and over the past 22 years, to get those like several hundred jokes, I wrote several thousand jokes. Probably maybe tens of thousands of jokes, hundreds of thousands of jokes, maybe millions of. I think I have a file on my computer. I know I have a file on my computer called All Jokes. And it's as far back as I started keeping track. So probably at least 20 years, 22 years or so. I believe the file has between 500,000 and 1 million words in it. And that doesn't mean, and so each joke is probably, a handful of those words. So there's definitely, I'd say hundreds of thousands of, certainly many tens of thousands of jokes that I've written. And you write enough jokes, some of them are going to connect. And so part of it is building from the ground up, just being like any idea that I think could be funny, any idea that I think could be interesting or that I want to talk about, I record it and I, just codify it. I'm like, these are the joke ideas. And then I try them out and piece them together, and they eventually find each other and find a shape. And the other end of it is, I remember talking to, do you know comedian Matt Ruby? Matt Ruby's a good buddy. Oh. Lives in New York, super funny and super thoughtful guy. And he and I remember talking to him years ago about how one of my favorite comics was Doug Stanhope. And he was like, that's so interesting because what you do seems very different than what Doug Stanhope does. And I was like, yeah, I mean, in some ways that's absolutely true, but I'm not like, I love Maria Bamford. I love Reggie Watts. I'm not going to try to be who they are because they are who they are. And I'm going to be, the only similarity is going to be, they're going to be uniquely them. I'm going to be uniquely me. And these days, I think I do, like at the time, it was just, more disjointed, silly, absurd one-liners, more akin to, a Stephen Wright, a Mitch Hedberg, an Emo Phillips, a Wendy Liebman, than a Myq Birbiglia. And so I looked at like what Birbiglia was doing and, these cohesive shows that are, a big story made of jokes, but with a narrative. And I was like, that wasn't something that I'm like, I respect it. I love it. And at the time, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was like, that's not me. That's not what I'm like. I don't think that's where I'm going. And the hours that I'm doing now are not, one person shows in the same style. I'm not like a moth style storyteller, but the shows that I'm doing now are often themed, often like, the show that I did tonight was mainly about, my grandmother and my mother. And I have another show that I'm working on that's about my relationship with masculinity that maybe I'll do tomorrow. And I still have hours of shows like that are full of jokes that don't go with other jokes. Just like I have a few albums still that are like, this is just in between the other albums. Here's a bunch of jokes.
Are you just going to Bob Dylan it and just drop like 60 albums in the next like 15 years?
I'm working on it. And I've been up like pretty consistently, have recorded about an album every 2 years for the past, since like 2009, 2010, there's probably like 7-8 hours recorded and variously available. Some of them only on satellite radio right now, but
when you're working on multiple hours at the same time.
Yeah.
And you just, one night you'll do this hour, the next night you do that hour.
Yeah.
That's unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a unique treasure. I'm a flower. I'm a snowflake.
I mean, are you writing on stage?
Yeah, I'm writing on stage. I'm writing off stage. I mean, in addition to those two sort of like, the grandmother hour isn't all like, it doesn't go in a specific order entirely yet. Like that'll come eventually. The masculinity hour is maybe the next one that I will record because it is kind of there's some places to like improvise, and some things that I can still add to it, but it has like a structure that I know how it starts, I know how it ends, and then I'm filling in the middle. And that's, to get back to the question, kind of the other thing. I have ideas of themes. I'm like, this is the theme that I want to write towards. Because it's a thing that I care about, whether it's my relationship with my girlfriend, whether it's memories about my grandmother, or my relationship with my mom, or my relationship with masculinity, or like religion, Buddhism, psychedelics, whatever the things are that are, meaningful and like arising a lot in my consciousness, on a daily basis. I'm like, well, these are where like the very first time I did it was an album I put out, I think I recorded in 2016, called No Kidding, which was about how I didn't want kids. And it was just because I dated a woman a few years earlier, and we would have probably stayed together if we either both wanted kids or didn't both want kids. But she wanted them and I didn't. And then that was just a major source of thought of mine for a while, a major source of like meditation. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could write a whole hour sort of blossoming out of this concept. And my girlfriend calls it, there's two phases to my comedy creation, and she calls it the blooming and the pruning phases. Like the blooming phase is just like, writing on stage, riffing, experimenting, seeing where things go, like more and more and more. And then the pruning phase is eventually like, trimming it down to its final form, and be like, okay, now this is how the song goes. And so that's a combination of those two things is how this hour came into being, where like, just wrote thousands of things, picked out the ones that, and had the theme in mind at the top, and be like, which of these ideas connect to that theme and which of them connect to each other? And then some of it's just a magical thing that I can't explain, where over the course of years, like there's a story about an ayahuasca ceremony that a friend of mine experienced that plays a role in this hour, that if he never told me that story, then I don't know how the hour would go, like, because it's like the linchpin. Like, without this story, like, it connects so many things. And if he didn't tell me, then it would have been something else. But just being open to everything and bringing it all in, and then like filtering it through the eyes of the theme.
So you mentioned like words, like you have so X amount of words. Are these written, audio, typed? So do you ever type in a word or a subject to like try to pull everything from these topics together and just filter it out in one through a search history, or do you just kind of know what's there?
More the latter, but that's a really interesting idea.
Like you could type in Mario and just have it bring up all the files.
Yeah, sometimes I do that. I do also, in addition to this one main file, I do have a series of other documents that, like if I like for the grandmother hour, I have like a grandmother document where I'll take the jokes. I will probably like search grandmother in the main file and then put all the relevant ones into the grandmother file. And same thing for, so yes.
I mean, because that's a lot of words to search through.
And most of them are like, the ones from 20 years ago. Like I have a lot of processes underway, and some of them are moving more slowly than others. But for example, I have a new, so this is, over 500,000 words, including lots of jokes that I wrote and didn't work, or eventually I decided I didn't want to do. But I'm coming up with an idea to create like a filtered version of it where I go back from the beginning and I'm like, oh, this is actually could be something that I've never used or never fully worked if I could add to this. But I'm like, these 7 things, I'm like, they're out. So like, there's like a new, I'll keep that file, but I'll have a new file that'll just be the things like, oh, for the future. But then also, in addition to the old things for the future, every day there's new things for the future. And so just like the way that I can't see all the movies, I can't listen to all the songs, I can't explore all of my own ideas. So I have to start from either the things that I think are most important now, most present now, most interesting now, the things that occur to me in the moment now, or the things that I've decided over the recent years or months or weeks or days are the ones I'm like, these are the ones that I want to do now.
All right. We got just a few minutes here. I just want to touch on this real quick and see. I think it's probably a little bit different because you came on the East Coast. You mentioned tonight on stage you were talking about the Jewish people in the audience, and you said something. You said there's some of you who've never even met a Jew, jokingly, but there's some honesty to that, and it triggered because I grew up a loudmouth political Jew in Kansas City as a comic doing the Midwest, these small town Kansas and Missouri. So I heard some shit like off stage, you know what I mean? And one of the ones I will never forget was, you're the first Jew I've even ever seen. Mm-hmm. And like that here just being at the hotel lobby, hotel bar, not even at the venue, just a random person just yelling, Jew, it's a Jew. Like, I'm not even at the venue anymore. This person wasn't even at the show. They're just like screaming, it's a Jew from across the fucking patio. Did you have to deal with any of that in being more East Coast? I know it's a lot higher Jewish population, but on what level did you have to deal? And again, we only have a couple minutes here.
So here are 2 answers. One, I met a person at a show in North Carolina 2 years ago that I talk about on stage sometimes because she said, I've never met a Jewish person before. And I was like, wow, I've never met a person that never met a Jewish person before, right? So we learned about each other's cultures. But starting out in Boston, obviously, Brandeis, where I went to school, had a good number of Jews. BU was also sometimes called BJew. But the comedy scene, there were some Jews, some Jews in comedy, but not as many in Boston as you'd find outside of Boston or like in New York for sure. And there definitely was anti-Semitic joking, which who knows how much joking is involved. But, comedian, friendly, ball busting. But like one time I was on, like I have a joke about this from early on where like they were bringing up comedians to music, and like a black guy got hip hop and I got the Price is Right theme song. And I was like, at the time, it didn't even register to me. Or like I did a show on April 15th one year, and the Italian headlining comedian I was opening for was like, tax day, but you got your taxes done. And I was like,
God.
I don't even know.
What?
Like I truly didn't know what he like. It was just a reference. It's like a stereotype as a reference that growing up I was entirely shielded from. Like my childhood in New Jersey, and then most of my college career. It was only when I started doing comedy that I was like, oh, there are people like I'd heard of the Holocaust. I'd heard of anti-Semitism, but
Never had to deal with it.
It was only from movies and outside of my own experience until doing comedy where I was like, oh, yeah, that's not cool.
And then, but you kind of took it from a place and a people who might use that just feel a little more free, even if it's not necessarily a hate. Like it is, they just feel a little more free in their healing, in the methods they use for healing.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't, like there's always different groups of people that we know nothing about from the inside, right? We're ourselves, and unless you are, a person of color and queer and disabled and, marginalized in every way. Like, and maybe there are some people who have many, many marginalizations. Most people don't have all of them. And so there's always some version that we don't have that we can be like, oh, like being Jewish isn't like the biggest minority in the world or in the country. Like, but it's something like, oh, we understand what non-Jewish culture is like because it surrounds us. Like, yeah.
See, I just think I had it the opposite. Midwest, it wasn't. I mean, we definitely have temples, and there's definitely a Jewish community, but much smaller and not as talked about. You're in Midwest, especially Kansas City. It's kind of the southern Midwest, right? Very Bible Belt, very country. I never understood why so many people have country accents and wear cowboy hats here, quite frankly. I never saw Kansas City as that way, even though it is the cow town. But I'm the minority, like I think they're the minority, but there's so many of them.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah. But I had to deal with it a lot. Not necessarily from a hateful way, but just friends, especially when you get to the mid to late teens and then early 20s, who don't have a lot of other Jewish friends, and friends want to razz you. They want to, they're going to talk shit to the other ones too, but it was that easy, low-hanging fruit of the Jew jokes, and I got so fucking sick of it, dude.
Oh, sure.
I got so fucking tired of it. And you can't tell you tried it. They don't hear you. South Park didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
That's an understatement if I ever heard one. I'm sure South Park helped some people, but
I will say the funniest is it the Jew Gold? There's no such thing as Jew Gold from a South Park episode. And I had a buddy do this, start this, say something to me, and I responded, and he pushed it, and I just kept responding, not overreacting, just my response and my reaction to it. And then I watched the South Park episode, and I literally was like word for word on script for how this scene played out, and that they were walking me through, and I'm just like, you guys are fucking assholes.
Wow.
Like I'm fucking tired, I to a point where I had enough friends in comedy at that point that they don't give a fuck, because comedy doesn't care about color. Comedy doesn't care about race or religion or weight or whether you can see or hear or talk. Comedy is like, can you make people laugh? If so, you're accepted, and you don't have to get that low-hanging fruit all the time.
And in fact, I mean, it's for good comedians, for people who care about the art and the craft, like, you don't want to tell a joke that's been told. And a stereotype is just an unfunny joke that's been told. It's just a reference that you can make art out of it, you know? Like there's great, you know, some great Sarah Silverman jokes from the past, like that play on stereotypes, but aren't just like, oh, you're this, that means that. It's like when I was in college, I met a guy and we became friends. When I first met him, he said, my name is Lex. And I just, by rote, like just instinct, I was like, oh, like Luthor? You know, that's like, you said Lex, I say Luthor. And he was like, you know, kind of upset. Just,
I haven't heard that a million times.
And yeah, and I feel like that's like a great analogy for what it's like for the kids who are making whatever jokes about Jews to you that you're hearing over and over all the time, you know, the same basic, you know, notes of the chord of stereotypes that they don't have any actual real life experience with. They're just parroting what they've heard on South Park or from, you know, dumb joke books or racist old people, you know, whatever it is. And then when you get into comedy, like hopefully comedians value, you know, originality and thinking things through and doing things that haven't been done before. But yeah, that's it's just so. And I mean, I'm not immune to having created some jokes out of the stereotypes
Sure.
that exist. And of course, it's different when it's like make fun of yourself, make fun of your own group as much as you want. But it's just, I can understand how they couldn't understand because them coming to you is like me going to my friend Lex and being like, well, I just heard your name's Lex for the first time. And they're like, we've never seen any Jews before. So it's all new jokes to us, you know? These are all new, but you have a bunch of people doing that. And yeah, so I feel like that's why it's always good to have, like, you know, what the third thought, you know, be the punchline. Don't, like, the first thought. Some people say first thought, best thought. And that can be good when you're doing improv.
There was a time I'd write 10 punchlines. Even if I thought the third one or the first one was it, I would write 10. If it was a setup punch, I'd write 10 of them out just to see where we end up at 10.
Yeah. And I mean, I do a lot of writing on stage now. And so sometimes I'll say something in the moment. I'm like, oh, that was good. And then later I'll be like, was it? You know? And sometimes yes, and sometimes, especially when you're playing with, you know, people's identities and feelings and emotions, then I feel like, you know, if it's a silly wordplay, it's not going to hurt anybody. But if it's, yeah, oh, your people, your family, your history, you know, your identity, your life, you know, that is my joke. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's just when you said, and I don't want to sit too long. But when you said there's some of you who've never even met a Jew tonight, I was like, oh man, like you brought it out of me, man. You brought it all came flashing back, you know. And but no, this is Myq. I could sit here for 7 hours. I mean, we had a list of topics. I think we talked about 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so. I love this.
I'll come back.
I look forward to the rest of the weekend. I look forward to sitting down with you again in the future.
The same.
Thank you so much. Follow us. Again, just follow us at the Comedy Club KC across the board. Find us right now at the Comedy Club, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and we'll see you out here at the Comedy Club in Kansas City. For Myq Kaplan, where can they follow you? What's your socials?
Thank you. Myq Kaplan is spelled weird. Myq Kaplan. I'm at Myq Kaplan, spelled like that everywhere. I've got a Substack newsletter. It's myqkaplan.substack.com. Comes out. You can sign up for free, or for more, you can subscribe and give me money. You can just Venmo me. You can just come up to me at the shows and buy my stuff, or just hand me money anytime. Did I mention I'm Jewish? Good night. No, yeah, MyqKaplan.com is the place to get everything, and my albums are all available on all of the platforms. And I've got a dry bar special called Live from the Universe. If you use the code Myq Kaplan, you get a free month. And my first hour special is on Amazon. It's called Small, Dork, and Handsome. And but yeah, I got a bunch of albums. And I said, come see me live. Find my dates online, or come see me dead. The recorded versions that exist online, those versions of me are dead, but I am alive. So yeah, at Myq Kaplan, all the places.
All right, we'll see you next week, guys. Thank you.